Philip, welcome to Inside the Pulse.
Thank you for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
How would you describe your role as the director of brand and partnership of Shinola in under 30 or 60 seconds?
Yeah, I love how you threw the time thing in there. Yeah, I mean, essentially my role is to help the brand grow, right? So I do that through a whole plethora of things. So I primarily work with our creative and marketing team, and basically defining how people can experience the brand visually and then through like our marketing channels. But I'm also across the whole brand. So any given week, you know, I showed you my calendar earlier, like I'm working with the retail team, I'm working with the activation team, I'm working with the hotel team, I'm working with the product team, the merchandising team.
And that's all day.
All day. Like I'm literally, again, showing you the calendar earlier, like from 9 a.m. till about 5, 6 o'clock, I'm pretty much in like back-to-back meetings.
And that's the thing. I feel like a lot of people think to themselves like, well, what exactly does a brand director do? You know,
Right.
Are they
It's a
setting
lot.
up the campaigns or like, so what does a day-to-day typical day look like for you?
Yeah. I mean, it really just depends like what season we're in, right? So right now it's like, you know, end of January, we kicked off Valentine's Day. So we are maintaining the Valentine's Day campaign, like testing it. How's the, you know, how are the emails performing? How's the
And how
content
far in
performing?
advance are you planning those?
Oh,
seasonal campaigns?
we're planned until July. Not everything's like done, but like we know what we're going to be doing up until June or July.
And just for reference, it's January, so that's like about 6 months.
6 months, yeah. And that's just on the marketing end. Product end, we already know product for 2026, and we are starting to solidify 2027. So product side, our lead times are like 18 to 24 months. So
then once that product is developed, how much time do you have before the public knows about it?
It really just depends. So like we'll know, like we already know what we're buying into for 2026. Like our merchandising team, we make our buys like almost 12 months in advance. And that's like pretty standard for any like fashion or like consumer good. Outside of like your, you know, your like kind of like press brands and stuff that can turn things around pretty quickly. Anything that is like produced at the scale we're producing things at, you know, we're looking at 12 to 18 months kind of like lead time. So like once our designers design product for, you know, for the following year, we pretty much know it's like going to be in the line, and then we can start ideating around it. But like we're focused on the current year. So like we're always like within 1 to 3 seasons. So like right now I'm working on executing 2025. We're planning 2026, like because we know like for the most part what the product's going to look like. And then we're concepting 27. So I'm juggling, like you're juggling all 3 of those things.
Yeah. Where
like, you know, designers or anyone else within the organization's kind of like focused on their silo. I'm more like kind of like out there and like understanding how all this makes sense. Like how are the stories we're telling in 2025 going to translate?
And in order too.
And in order, right? And translate to 2026. And then how are those things going to shape what we think about doing in 27?
Right.
And just like starting to create cohesiveness, you know, and just like the thing that we're really trying to focus on is like when you come in contact with the brand, you're having the same message delivered to you, no matter if it's through our own channels or our wholesale partners or like our influencers or our content partners, whoever we're working with. And we're like, I think this year we're starting to like really hone in on like that cohesiveness. But there's a lot of moving parts. We have 21 stores. And like, you know, how do we communicate to all those stores how products should be VM'd and what imagery they should be using and like how they should be talking about products?
Yeah. Do you guys have actual like store like demos in the warehouse where you kind of?
So we have a mock shop. It's called the mock shop. We built a store in our headquarters.
Wow.
So we built a store in the headquarters where our visual merchandising team will sit there and go, all right, this product's coming out in 6 months. How do we want to create the display tables? So they'll spend time, you know, and we work with other partners to like build like, I think 7 or 8 of our doors have like street facing windows. So like that's another component of it too. Like what does that experience look like? So they do all that. The VM team does all that work, but we have a store. We built a replica store in our HQ.
Wow.
And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like making product is half the battle. Oh, third of the battle. Making, things that people want to buy. Marketing in those things is a third of the battle. But then how people experience those things is like another third of the battle, right? Yeah. And like our brand is very palpable, right? So it's like you see one of our bags online, you go, oh wait, that it's like a $1,000 bag. I don't know, like, but then you go to the store and you touch the bag and you feel it and you can smell that
what's
leather.
Interesting that you bring that up is I thought about that, and I think that for some people when they see a bag, a luxurious bag, and it's $1,000 in their mind, they're comparing it to other bags that are leather,
100%.
but they have no problem going to buy like a little clutch from Louis Vuitton or Gucci for double the price.
Right.
And I think it's like when you compare, it's like it takes time to get there. You think the difference between when Shinola was started and Louis Vuitton is like 157 years.
100%.
You know,
we talk about that all the time.
It takes time.
The heritage. You can't you can't fake heritage. Like that just comes with time. And it's like, it's funny because so many people think we've been around longer than we are because we've done such a good job of like owning, the brand and keeping the brand, like keeping control of the brand. And that kind of goes back to like my role is just like making sure we're doing things that are, quote unquote on brand.
Yeah.
And I know it feels like, kind of a buzzworthy thing to say. And like, there's always kind of tropes in like, marketing and brand world and like, oh, what's, we're very authentic. We're always on brand. And like, I think a lot of times people like to use those things as cop-outs, but they can't tell you what their brand is. You know what I'm saying? And I think like, and I'm lucky because I've only been with Shinola for 2 years now. And I came into a very established brand, which makes my role like much easier.
Smooth transition,
yeah. Like I always tell like the team, like what we say no to is more important than what we say yes to.
When you say team, what does that look like?
Well, I mean, I think
how big
holistically, like the whole company's my team. Like like I said earlier, I'm across like pretty much every.
The reason I like to ask is because people would be surprised to find out. I don't know if it's changed since I've been there, but in the Detroit Tigers organization, the marketing department was like 4 or 5 people.
Wow. Yeah.
Super small.
Yeah. I think that's changed a bit.
Have no doubt. But like, I think people hearing kind of a metric helps them kind of
like actual like visualize it. Yeah. I mean,
because Shinola is like over 400 employees worldwide.
Yeah. So if you, I think the breakdown is probably like we're about 200, 220, 225 like retail, right? 21 stores, about 8 to 10 people per store. Some of that's part-time people, like during the holidays, we'll ramp up seasonal and like some of it, the Ann Arbor campus, like our Ann Arbor store is like
internal, like near your office. How many people are you talking to on a daily basis?
Yeah. I mean, let's think probably like anywhere from like 30 to 40 to 50 people. But that's across like product, merchandise, retail, operations, the hotel team's a whole separate team.
You guys have such a dominant footprint in the city.
Yeah.
I mean, you have like storefronts, hotels.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that when people think of the brand, obviously the first thing that comes to mind is Detroit.
Yeah.
But it's just like and you're right. You said that people often think that it's been around a lot longer than it has. So you guys actually pulled the original font and the logo from
the original shoe shine.
Yeah. And it was what, 1920 when that one?
I think
around that time.
Yeah.
Do you know the story behind that? Like why?
Yeah. So there's like, it's a colloquial saying that like you don't know shit from Shinola, right? So that started I think in World War I or II. Maybe I think II. It might have been II, where you had these like generals who would make their cadets like shine their shoes. Like if you got in trouble, you'd have to like shine shoes all day, and they would use Shinola to shine the shoes. And one day this cadet was like really like frustrated, disgruntled, and he ended up replacing the Shinola shoe polish with cow manure and shined his sergeant's boots with it. And then the sergeant walked around all day, was like, what's that smell? And then the cadet said, oh, you don't know shit from Shinola. Like you don't know the difference between shit and the actual Shinola, which was the polish.
Wow. So
the story goes, so that's like some context, right? The story goes, our founder, Tom Karstotis, when he decided to start Shinola, he wanted to bring American manufacturing. He wanted, like, that was his goal, was to like bring 100 jobs. The whole company started with the ethos of bringing 100 jobs to Detroit. And around the time he had the idea for Shinola, Detroit went bankrupt. So he goes, all right, I want to go to Detroit and start 100 jobs. Like, my goal is to create 100 jobs and like impact the city. And he spends a lot of money building a watch factory in America, which hasn't been done in 50 or 60 years. Like, we have the first watch factory in America in almost 60 years now. And
what's his background?
He started Fossil and sold Fossil. Yeah. Yeah. So he comes from the watch world, but Fossil was historically made overseas. And that ended up being like a multi-billion-dollar business.
Did he ever share with you why it was important for him to kind of, for that mission to bring those jobs to Detroit?
I think I just kind of think he was just like at a moment where he like had some success and was just kind of like, after a certain point, it becomes bigger than you, right? Yeah. Like, he accomplished everything he wanted to accomplish, and he was like, all right, like, I want to do this, and I want it to be rooted in something I believe in.
What's his tie to Detroit?
So basically, it was just as he was coming up with the brand, Detroit went bankrupt that same week, and was like, that's what I want to do. I want to help this. Wow. I want to help this city.
That's so.
And it was a larger like conversation around like helping America, and like, again, like, there's a lot of the messaging we're using this year that kind of reverts back to this old, like the original brand, like the original
heritage,
the heritage that what the brand started, and like the first tagline Shinola used was like, where America's made. And I think there was some stuff that happened with the FTC around that, and they kind of let it go. And now we are trying to bring back a new line where it's like the American watchmaker, or the American watch brand, or the American watch company.
You can definitely feel the leadership, because for a brand that's hasn't been around that long, and you have clientele like Barack Obama and Bill Clinton rocking Shinola watches and gifting them.
Yeah,
I mean, that's not a common.
No, and it's the thing is, just like, I think people want a reason to believe in something, right? Like, there are a lot of brands out there now that are just, they feel very like, oh, this is a topical thing, I'm gonna chase this trend. We always talk about like, we like make deliberate decisions not to chase trends. And that comes through like our marketing, that comes through our like product design. Our designers are like so incredibly talented that, like, for us, it's always like, we want this watch to look good now, and we want this watch to look good in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years. Like, we want things to be timeless. And we want you to wear them.
That's how you reach
and
that,
use them.
That cultural capital.
Yeah.
Like, where you have these brands that they don't have to make 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 units. They have a list of people that they know are going to buy their products once they become available. Half the time, doesn't matter what they look like. The bags can literally be like a little bubble, and I want it. You know, it's cultural capital. That's literally what I feel like a lot of pop cultural, like, are chasing. And young people, and it's cool too, because you also see artists, once they come into money and they start to feel, that what it's like to go into a store that you can buy a $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 bag or shirt. And then you have all these fans that are looking at this young person, or, doesn't matter the age, but they're like, I want to reflect that. And I feel like that has to be a major part of the strategic approach for a lot of brands too. It's like the partnerships that they develop.
100%. And I think on our end too, like, even the way we talk about like developing product and merchandising product, like, we have so many conversations every week about price points. Like, our run.
Say that again. Price points.
What are we selling product for? So like, our we have the Runwell, right? The very first watch that we made, and it's $595, and we've kept it. I think the first year we dropped it in like 2013, it was like $550. We raised it just a little bit over the course of the last like 10 years. So it's like $595.
Yep.
Yeah. So you can get an American-made watch, like American assembled watch, built here in Detroit, literally a mile up the street, for $595, and it's going to last you forever. And then on the other side of it too is like, we're starting to develop, more kind of premium watches, right? we just introduced automatic movements about 5 years ago, and we're really trying to expand automatic line. And like, you know, we're
how do you explain the difference between the $595 watch and then premium watches?
Yeah. So the easiest way is kind of like the mechanics of the watch, right? So what we kind of like, I guess the car terminology is like the engine, right? So like the Runwell has a quartz movement. So that's a battery powered movement. So most quartz watches are like, you know, around anywhere from $50 to like Cartier sells a quartz for like a couple thousand, but like that's on the very high end of the spectrum, right? But it's based on the movements and based on the engine, right? So quartz movements are battery powered. And then you have mechanical movements, which are like self-winding. You have to wind the movement every day and the watch will tick. And then there's automatic movements where like this one I'm wearing, where it winds when you move it. So this movement's it's more complicated because the movement has to account for how your hand gyrates, and it has to account for like how often you're moving it for it to wind inside. So this, like, we dropped a watch earlier this year that we counted individual pieces and parts, 261 parts that were like put together to make just the movement.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
I think like the first thing that kind of, the word that comes to mind for me is time. Yeah. Like the amount of time that it takes to produce something, that is like what equates to value, because I can't remember the luxurious or the car maker, but I remember seeing an ad or a post about it where it's like, it takes us 6 months to make this car. Right. You may be able to go get, you know, another car that goes through a manufacturing line, but this car takes 6 months to produce. That's why it's got this price tag. Yeah. And it's funny. So we talking about time, and like for us, we put a lot of care into how we build our watches and the quality control checks we've established. And this is where I'm about to get like kind of watch head nerdy on you, but like our operations team, the factory team, like I love going up there and talking to them because I learned so much. Like we actually developed our own testing. So we built in-house machines that test the watches. So standard like Swiss kind of factories will test a quartz movement for about like 2 seconds. And that will give them enough kind of standard deviation to know that like this movement will work. We test our watches for 7 minutes. So we developed our own machinery to test the product, right? Because like we're offering limited lifetime warranty. Like we can't just like say, hey, you can come get this fixed whenever. It's the experience. You know, it's the
so we put that much time into not only building the watches but testing them. And every watch goes through a very rigorous test process before it even goes to the shelves or goes on your wrist. And like that's the stuff that we don't even storytell around.
And that's literally what, you know,
that's just like out of respect for the craft.
100%. And I think that some people might be thinking, you know, a group of people might be thinking, well, why do I care about that? Right. You know, and then you have those people that are like, if I have the resources to pay for something unique and special, people are like, that's the whole thing about America is like, or the world is people are always looking for unique experiences. And if you have the means and resources to acquire those experiences, there has to be options. You know? So it's not for everybody. You know?
I love how you said it's like, oh, why would I care about that? And I like my rebuttal is you don't have to care, but we will always care. And when you're ready to care, we're still gonna be here. Like for us, it's about, like I said, it's about the craft. It's about respecting watchmaking. It's about like, you know, our watch team, our product development team, like we're very adamant on like bringing American manufacturing back. Like the watch world is better when America is a player in it, right? And you know, we're literally the only company that is producing watches in America at scale. Like we can produce anywhere, you know, 50, 60, 70, 80,000 watches a year.
It's a piece of art.
You know,
it's a piece of art.
It is.
You know, like when people, and I always like to compare and contrast, because I think when people can see from a different lens and they're like, oh, well, I understand why I would spend $50,000 on a piece of art. Oh, it is a piece of art. It makes sense. Now get it, spending $50,000 on a piece of art.
Right. Yeah.
It's perspective.
Yeah.
That's literally it. So going back to my my question on the partnership. So like, you have, for one, you have so much going on throughout the year. You're planning, and you have so many different types of products.
Yeah.
You have bags, jewelry, watches.
Yeah.
So how do you approach partnerships?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a good question. I think for every brand it's different. I think there's a couple things that like I use as guardrails. And the first is like, I always say like 1 + 1 has to equal 3. Right? Like, and what I mean by that is that like the first one is like brand one, our brand. Second one is the other brand. What we create has to be larger than the sum. So it has to be larger than 2, right? What we create there has to be something that's derived from it.
Purpose.
That is 3, right? That's what we call 3, right? 1 + 1 = 3. It's kind of the first guardrail, right? And you can kind of tell pretty quickly, like, when we get approached by so many different, partners, organizations, people,
what do those
brands.
usually look like, the people approaching you?
I mean, a lot of people just want to make watches with us. And it's like, oh, I want to do this collab on a watch. And I'm just like, we could, but to me, that feels like 1 + 1 = 2, right? It's like, it's expected. We make watches already and we do it well. And, like, it doesn't excite us as much as
don't bring peanut butter to the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Bring jelly.
Literally, right? So yeah, a lot of the inbound stuff is usually around some sort of like, hey, let's do a custom watch. Which we're not against, but like it just doesn't excite us as much as like other things, right?
Yeah.
So 1 + 1 has to equal 3 always. And then there's this thing about like novelty, right? I think what makes a good kind of partnership or collaboration is that like what you and the other partner are creating has to be novel, right? Like, could this thing exist without both you coming together? And that's kind of the question I ask myself is like, if we're going to do something with another brand, I would want to do something that like could only happen if our 2 resources can make it happen, So I think that's another important thing, because you see a lot of brands who just like, will collab and like just kind of logo slap and just like, oh, hey, here's a thing, like our logo, their logo, and on like a product. And it just feels very expected. It doesn't feel thoughtful,
Produced,
like the level of kind of like storytelling that we do that goes into the products and the craft of everything. Like those are all things that we're always considering. And then the last thing is just like authenticity, right? And I know it's kind of like, again, like another buzzword, but like, once you have a very clearly defined brand, you know pretty quickly what you stand for and what you don't stand for, and like what makes sense, right? And again, these are just rules, and like again, rules are always meant to be broken, but these are just kind of guardrails that I kind of just like always keep in the back of my head when we're evaluating things. So yeah, those are some of the things that we're always just like thinking about, and like when we evaluate opportunities, those are the things that we're kind of grading against.
What was a partnership, since you've became the director of brand at Shinola, that you were super excited about executing?
Yeah, so there's a lot. There's 2 that I really, really do like love, and there's one that's gonna happen later this year that I can't talk about. But the first kind of like dope thing that we did was we worked with Dos Jefes. So they're based in Detroit. They're an upcycle brand. And I met PJ randomly just going to some like pop up, and we started talking, and I was just like blown away. I was like, yo, like they do some incredible stuff. They take all these old clothes, they remix them, bring life into them, and they make some really incredible pieces.
What are they called?
Dos Jefes garments. They got like a little like studio up at Russell, in the Russell Center. And it's like, it's PJ and Sam, and Pablo, and Wax, and they just like, they're in there all day sewing and like thrifting, collecting stuff. And I was talking to PJ one day. I was like, yo, like we have a ton of excess leather and like sample stuff that like we just kind of keep on hand. Like we donate, leather and stuff to CCS and to the fashion school CCS. But there's some stuff here that like we just don't need.
Yeah.
I was like, could you guys do something with this? And he's like, dude, this is wild. So they came to the headquarters and met with our product development team, and we were kind of showing them, like, you know, we source leathers from Italy and Switzerland, Sweden, like all these like incredible places, and like the canvas we use, and like all this stuff. Like, you know, there's denim that we source from Vidalia Mills, like they're based in America, like American like we have all this incredible material. And I was like, oh, could you guys like make something with this? And they're like, absolutely. So they ended up, it took them about 3 or 4 months. They made 30 bags, custom bags, using every bag had Shinola product in it.
Wow.
Like some sort of leather canvas.
Did you approach it with like, I want you to do these many units, or how did?
It was basically just like, what do you like? What can you guys make? It's just like, literally it's for them, right? So it's like, what can you do? And then we kind of worked backwards. And we ended up doing this like release party at our flagship on Canfield, and the bags sold out in 2 hours. Granted, it's only 30 bags, but they sold out so quickly. And then during the process this is where I started to kind of like inject some of my like, you know, marketing kind of like philosophy. We ended up filming a documentary, like a 5-minute kind of short on the process. And we introduced, you know, Dos Fs and PJ and what they were doing and the project. And that was kind of one of the first times we really, really started to like do some really deep storytelling around like this thing, right? Because to me, it's like I said earlier, like making something and doing something is half the battle, right? You like, do you have the best song in the world if no one's ever heard it? Right? So it's like, we create these products.
It's like the packaging.
All of it. It all has to reflect what you're doing.
It has to be the experience.
Yeah.
You know?
And like how people discover it in social. And like we posted some cut downs on Instagram. And
can you explain what cut downs mean?
So like out of that 5-minute video, we like, you know, would take 45-second clip and cut it down.
Got it.
And put it on Instagram. And those videos for that year, like organic views, like some of the best videos we've ever posted. Because it's real. It's like, it's real.
And it's local.
And there's a story to it. And like, you get to like follow along. And like, it for us, it was just like a really good example of like how we can activate the whole ecosystem, right?
It's such a brilliant, genius strategy, because I think that when people really tap into their community and develop partnerships and relationships with people that are just, because the thing is, it's like, when you look at brands that scale quickly, they have different access to resources than smaller brands.
Right.
Doesn't make them better than the smaller brands. It's a boutique. You know, it's exclusive. You know, so I think that when companies and organizations tap into that, they really they benefit a lot. Because it's like, it's almost like getting permission to, or not permission, but just kind of like, I know him, so I'm going to get in because I know him type of thing. You know? So like the community's really going to adopt it and appreciate it, because they look at a brand like Shinola and they're like, this is a big brand. You know? And they're doing something with someone from our hood or someone from our neighborhood. It's dope. We're going to share it. We're going to talk about it.
And I think like for me, it's also important. I talk a lot about like there is a responsibility as a brand, right? And like, you know, I want to make sure that like the budgets we do have, like I want that to go back to the community, right? Like we've worked with so many talented creators. Like we work with Daniel Rybar, who's an incredible photographer. He's a local photographer. Emmanuel Phoebe, who's produced a lot of videos for us, and he's local. When you say work, what does that partnerip look like with those different types? So on the content side, it looks like a lot of things, right? So like we'll work with people like Daniel Rybar. We'll contract him to kind of shoot some of our like, you know, seasonal campaigns. Emmanuel will contract to do like video series. He's an incredible director and filmographer. So like we have resources, and I'm like, all right, cool. Like our internal teams are shooting our product, our e-com stuff. Like there's so much stuff that we have to produce every day just for the brand to exist, right? On the website, our social, where like, all right, now we have some freedom to like tell some stories and work with people. And like, you know, we I think maybe 2 holidays ago, I had this idea. I was like, hey, I want to create custom gift wrap So we worked with 4 different artists. We worked with Mike Hahn, Tony Hooligan, India Solomon, and Martina Alexandra.
And that's the wrapping that it's in.
So we had them paint craft paper, blank craft paper. They were in the store live painting, and then you could go, hey, I want to use that as my gift wrap. So we had this whole, it was like a whole system set up where there was like our Canfield store has like this 18-foot back wall, and we like created these like custom hooks, and they were hanging gift wrap, painting it, and then hanging it for dry, and then you could go buy us something and use that gift wrap that you saw someone paint.
It wasn't like a replica of it?
No. They were live painting. Wow. Yeah, I didn't want to commission them to like do a design and us print it, because again, all of us, for everything we do, it's about craft. It's about that like analog nature of it. And some, not every single one was perfect, but like that's what happens when you. It's
so important. You're telling the story. In every way, not just in the product.
Yeah. So like the money I would have spent on buying the gift wrap, I gave to the artist to paint. So now I'm putting money. Like that's just a small example of how like we'll use brand resource, and we'll work with an artist and help support them. But then also make something really cool. Like you get this custom one-of-one gift wrap.
It's a cultural moment.
It's a moment. Yeah. And right. So it's like, those are the things that we're always cognizant of. And like, even going down to like the vendors we work with, we always try to support, vendors that are mom and pop, that are women owned, that are, diversity owned.
When you say vendors, can you just,
so like anything from like, when we do events, like, all right, catering companies, like making sure like, we've worked with Cooking with Q. She's over on Woodward. We worked with Babbo Fair. We did this activation, I think maybe last Christmas before. I was like talking to him. He's like, "Oh, I just bought this food truck." I'm like, "Oh, that's really sick." I was like, "Can I buy you out for a couple hours? You pull up to the store. We'll give away free food." So like stuff like that is like, we're always trying to figure out how we can support local.
Are you thinking about this all day?
All day.
All these different cultural moments?
All day.
Do you have like just a map in your office of like...
So I'm a very visual person. We have like, you have to come to the office one day and I'll show you. Like where I sit, I have this like, probably like a 12-foot like board, like foam board. And the first half of it is a calendar for the whole year. So I have I have a month by month printed out calendar. And I have everything filled out as far as like what projects working on, product drops, brand moments, everything. And then the other side of the board, because it sits like on wheels, is all just inspiration. Cool photos.
And where are you finding the inspiration from?
Everywhere.
Instagram.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. Internet, and that's everywhere. Just being online.
What are you actively searching for?
I don't even know anymore. Like I get just naturally, like my algorithm gives me a lot of watch content.
I was just gonna say
gives me, I'm love food.
I feel like if you're purposeful with your search, it's gonna start to feed you.
Yeah. But you just start finding stuff, right? And it's just like, again, we're always looking at what other brands are doing. We're always looking at, what other creators are doing, and like, it's just, you just have to know, right? You have to be, so much of my job is just being in the know, like knowing that Dos Jefes exists, knowing that this thing exists. Yeah. And this is just for Detroit. Yeah. We do this across all the markets. Yeah. So like being tapped into what's happening in New York and Chicago and LA and Miami and like all these cities is like, so much of it is like, I curate kind of what I consume. And I try to do the best job I can to like understand like what is happening, what's relevant, what are things that we can, amplify and attach ourselves to and showcase, and who are cool people doing things. And like, and again, like you said, once you start to kind of like see some of the stuff you like and gravitate towards, like, the algorithms do a pretty good job of like feeding you, that kind of content.
And for anyone kind of thinking in their mind, overwhelmed by like, well, shit, how the fuck would I do all of this for my company? I think that it's like, once you get to a point where you know what your budget is, you're able to kind of allocate it in a way that makes sense and gives you that kind of free bandwidth to be like, all right, I know what I got to work with here. I know what I got to work with here. And then it just becomes a little
bit a little easier. Yeah. Again, like any guardrails help, right? I think a lot of times, like, not my very first, like one of my I used to work in ad agencies. So I was like an ad man, kind of lived all over. But when I was in New York, I worked for this agency called Noble People. And what they taught me was that I would like sit in on some of the pitches, and they had this thing that they would say where it's like advertising and marketing is like, there's a big circle of what you could do. And our job is to tell you what you should do. And that should
explain that a little bit.
So like, as a brand, right? We could do anything. The could, that circle is very big, right? We could literally do it. We could partner with anybody, make any product, like we could buy billboards, do digital ads, buy YouTube pre-roll. Right. The could is big. But what you should do is very small within that could. You know what I'm saying? So if you think about a circle, the could is large. What you actually should be doing is a much smaller circle. And that's when you start to like really hone in on like strategy, business strategy, marketing strategy, like what are we trying to accomplish? And you have to get very pointed in like the problems you're solving. So like we know every single year, like, all right, here's what we need to do. Here's the product coming out. Here's the stories we got to tell. Like our should is like very, very dialed in.
It's so important.
So it makes it easy for us to like say no to things.
Yeah, because like I know some people might be thinking, well, what should I do? Right. And it's like, well, first you got to know what you want.
Right.
You got to know what your customer looks like. Right. Where are they spending their time? Where are they?
Who are they?
Who are they? What do they wear? What do they listen to? You know, like you're thinking about all those things. You have to. Yeah. Let me correct myself. If you want to be around for a long time,
right, you should.
You should. You know, if you just want to rely on paid ads and get some, you know, and then go and do something else, that's fine. But if you're a brand that wants to be around for a long time, you have to care. You have to invest in it. It's so important. Brand's
everything. Everything.
It's everything. For some organizations, it's the most expensive asset that they own.
100%.
Nike, for example.
100%. Your brand is everything.
So what advice would you give to a local, like coffee shop, local salon, local, they're starting to get traction. Like they got a solid clientele. The experience is pretty, dope. Yeah. What advice would you, like if you stepped in for the day as the director of brand for them, what would be a piece of advice that you would give? Just start here.
Yeah, I mean, there's always so many variables, but I think like in general, I'm a big advocate of like owning your audience. So what I mean by that is like, what avenues do you have to talk to your audience? Most people go, oh, I have a big Instagram account. But if Instagram's gone tomorrow, you don't have that audience. So like grow your email list, grow your SMS, your text list, like have as much direct ownership of your audience as you can. Right. I think that's like the number one thing I would focus on. And do whatever you need to do. Like do whatever, like my efforts would be like, how do we grow these lists? Like, how do I grow an email list? Like that to me is probably the biggest thing. Right. And then once you have that, it's like, all right, cool. How do I communicate? How often am I communicating? What am I communicating? And making sure that like you have that one-to-one.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's got to be valuable. Like, I think 100%. That people forget in their mind, they kind of think of marketing. They're like, all right, I got to talk about my product. I got to show people the new design. And but like, as the old saying goes, people want to buy from people they like.
Right.
And if they don't know you, 9 times out of 10, they might go with another option.
Yeah.
You know?
And then that's another thing I think that I've really been focused on in the last like year, 12 months is like, how do we expand like our storytelling? And, we do a really beautiful job at shooting product and you go to our Instagram, you'll see like beautifully shot product all the time and product videos. But I've been able to, in the last like 2 years, like start introducing things that like expand that aperture. And like, we really are focusing on like, all right, cool. How do we balance product moments with brand moments and storytelling moments? So that's another thing that, again, we're trying to introduce. And
Can you give some insight into that?
Yeah. I mean, so there's like 2 things that kind of come to mind. The first is like we started a show, a digital series called The Movement. And again, watches have movements. And it's inspired by Hot Ones, right? Like there's a whole like interview kind of style thing happening. Hot Ones, sneaker shopping, all sorts of those things. And the premise of the show is it's the first ever watchmaking interview show. So what we do is we bring celebrities into the factory. They come to Detroit. We put them in, put them in the smocks and the hand gloves, the hair nets, and we put them into the factory and we go build a watch. And while they're doing it for the first time ever, we start asking them questions.
Do they have direction? Like
we give them some direction. Not a ton, but we give them some direction. It's playful. But for me, I saw a huge opportunity to start connecting the brand to culture in a way that only we could do it. Again, we have a state-of-the-art 10,000 square foot watch factory in Detroit. And I was like, all right, how do I use this? How do I tell people that we have this thing? How do I educate people, but also entertain them? So, I started reaching out to some people, mostly kind of like friends of the brand and like kind of through some relationships. And, I was like, hey, listen, we have this idea for a show. Would you love to be on it? And Sam Richardson loves Sam to death, was the first person to be like, I'm in. Like, he's a big Shinola fan, big watch guy. Him and Tim Robinson.
How many episodes have you filmed so far?
We filmed, I think, 11, and we've posted 8 or 9.
And based on the response so far, what have you received in terms of insight on that strategy?
Oh, I mean, so much. So I think the 8 or 9 episodes we posted in the last 12 months accounted for 1/5 of our total views online. And then the cool thing is, what I love about Instagram is like, there's a metric that says non-followers reach. And that's what we track the most. Is this the content we're producing? Is it bringing new eyeballs in? People who don't follow the brand? Are people discovering us through this content? So I don't remember the exact number, but I think like it's got to be close to 50-60% of our total non-followers reach come from the movement content.
It's always the very first thing that I recommend to brands. It's like, collaborate. Collaborate. The whole point is it's been done our whole life. Right. Like songs, you got artists featuring artists. 100%. Like you got, a movie star wearing a certain shoe brand. It's Paris Hilton walking out the store with the Starbucks cup and then all of a sudden it blows up. Like there's certain things that I feel like people don't, or maybe, I don't know, maybe they just forget. Maybe they forget. I mean, like it's something that is so simple but so complex in their mind.
100%. And I think a lot of it for us is like, we would never just come out and like hire a celebrity to be in a campaign. That just doesn't feel like us. Like, again, knowing what our brand stands for, like it just doesn't. We've never done that. Historically, we don't work with celebrities in that light. But I knew that it's important to be relevant. So when I was coming up with the show, it was the idea was like, all right, how can I introduce celebrity to the brand and kind of capture that cultural relevancy, but also at the same time educate our audience on like the watchmaking process, right? So it ended up just kind of like becoming this idea of like watchmaking show with celebrities.
And it's funny too, because it's like you get to see you're tapping into so many different emotions. Like humor,
a lot of humor, a lot of frustration, a lot of just art, we've had so many great moments. Sam Richardson, Tim Robinson, Royce the 5'9" came, Alice Cooper came and did one, Jaden Ivey from the Pistons. Hope hope he heals up soon. Mia Serafino, she was in The Beef, the Netflix show, like huge. She's from Detroit.
How did you go about picking these personalities?
Honestly, a lot of it was like there's a lot of kind of customer data we have. Like we know who's buying watches and who comes to store. So we knew Sam and Tim were fans of the brand. Like they obviously follow us on Instagram, engage with our content. So I just reached out to both of them first. They were my first two. I was like, if I can get Sam and Tim, like this to me is a win.
It's brilliant, bro, because I think that, you really do have to tap into your network. That's the very first place to start. If you're a brand that you don't know how to, let's go back to the coffee. If you're a coffee shop and you have the owner of Quicken Loans coming into your coffee shop every day, leverage that. Figure out a clever way to develop something out of that.
Right.
Because 9 times out of 10, they would be open to it.
I find most people are willing to help if you make it easy for them to help you. You know? So yeah, we kind of just leverage relationships and leverage kind of, you know, all like just the brand's been around for 10 years. So many people, you know, have supported it, you know, everyone from Barack Obama to athletes, celebrities, and musicians.
Are you guys sending product to anyone?
We seed, not a ton because it's like expensive. Like, you know, even like, you know,
say that again. You said we
seed product. Okay. It's like gifting, seeding, just like some, like, I guess like industry terms.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have a gifting budget that, you know, that we kind of share throughout the company, and, you know, that we gift product to, you know, we'll always try to find relevant kind of moments to give product to people. And a lot of it's, you know, too, like, hey, listen, like, you don't have to post, but like, we would love for you to share this.
Yeah, because
you know?
sometimes they don't, and
it's fine, right? That's part of the gamble.
Yeah, it happens.
You know, and I get it. People, you know, have platforms and they have their audiences, and like reaching that audience comes with the price tag, and I respect that. But yeah, we do both ends of the spectrum. Like, you know, we work with kind of content creators and to like to film content for us, which we compensate them for. You know, we did a campaign around the holidays where we worked with like, you know, I think 3 or 4 or 5 different creators and had them kind of like go to the store and do like last minute shopping content.
And this is like local influencers?
No, we didn't use anyone from Detroit. I think we focused on Chicago and Venice. And again, a lot of it for us too is like balancing, like, you know, we are so well known here, right? And it's like, all right, how do we have the same kind of like market share we do in Michigan, and how do we build that in New York? How do we build that in LA? How do we build that in Chicago and DC? Like markets that are very, you know, important for us. So we're always balancing those two things, right? Like a lot of the focus for me has been like growing the brand outside of Detroit, you know, and like, again.
And what is like been on your mind in that regard?
I mean, I think there's a lot of things, right? I think one overall is like, all right, how do we find ways to work with celebrities and influencers and talent and athletes, and stuff like the movement helps. We started another series called Factory Sessions, which is kind of like our version of Tiny Desk. We bring people in and have them perform one song. It's one song, one take. We had Third Eye Blind come in like 2 months ago. We've done a ton of local people with that. We worked with
where do you guys publish the content?
So all the content the cut downs live on our Instagram, and then the full videos live on our YouTube. And then we're working on embedding video into our website and different moments, and like having this kind of repurposing it through kind of throughout our ecosystem. But Factory Sessions, we ended up working with Assemble Sounds. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're based in Detroit. Garrett and Shaq, incredible people. They do such incredible work for kind of the music community here. And I reached out to them, same kind of thing, on a cold whim. I was like, hey, listen, want to start this thing. Here's how we want to shoot it. Do you guys have artists that we could work with? And they sent us like 20.
And this is just through email or?
Email, DMs. I'll eventually get to texting and like just however I can contact someone, I'm contacting someone. And that's the thing,
bro. I feel like some people, they're like, well, how do I reach out to these people?
You just got to do it.
You just
got to do it.
You're not going to get a response from everybody.
No, but like,
if you throw out 100, you might get 10, you know?
If you're lucky, right? And like, but that's part of the process that I think people don't understand is like, for as many yeses as we get, I get 10x like no's. So much of my day is people telling me no.
And I'm curious, like when you create these, you know, pieces of content, like what's the type of feedback you get from like the market? Like what are people saying? Like, what are people like?
I mean, everything's a little different. It's all like, I would say 99% of it's positive. Where it's like, oh, I didn't know Shinola did that. That's really cool. Like, you know, a lot of what I was trying to build, a lot of what we're trying to build is episodic, right? So like, there's always going to be something coming, right? And series, like, we're getting people, we're kind of educating our audience to think that way now, and like we're getting stuff where it's like people are start commenting on the videos, like, oh, I've been waiting for this episode, or like I can't wait for the next episode, like, and it's a very hard thing to get people to come back every single, like, just in general, right? We're inundated with so many different things, right? Like there's new shows every week, and there's new movies
it's
and
like
music.
Keeping
the attention, right? And it's like, for us, it's about understanding that like we're not always going to have the attention, But if we can be consistent and make, you know, different kind of touch points throughout the year, I'm pretty confident that we'll reach you, you know, 5 to 10 times.
And that's just a thing that every brand is dealing with. It's like, how do I get attention? How do I keep attention? Or how do I get it back?
Right.
You know, because it fluctuates. I mean, people are now posting and producing content at a scale that
it's insane. There's too much.
You know, it's never been.
Like, it's wild. Like, sometimes I even think too, I'm like, yo, like, we have so much stuff in the pipeline between product drops and then the brand content and then the storytelling. And then, like, you know, I'm just like, dude, we're like, there's too much stuff to talk about.
But I do want to, but I do want to say that, like, when I would assume that there are brands out there that don't want to share as much because of that. You said there was like 95% positive like comments, and then 5% that are like talking shit.
Yeah.
Like, why would you stop from creating for 5% of? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're gonna have it, but there's a button that's called block. And you just block or mute them and then keep it moving.
That's it.
You know, you don't produce for the people that don't support you. You 100%. Produce for the people that do.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like everything we do is for the customer. It's for our consumer, right? It's for our customer. It's for them.
Yeah, bro. So, and like, too, sometimes I find that, like, sometimes those negative people, they just want somebody to hear them, attention. And they end up turning into, like, a supporter. I'm like, well, they just needed a little love.
That's it, man. That's it. And again, everyone's on a different kind of, like, everyone's in a different part of the process too, right? Like, oh, maybe I just heard of Shinola. I'm not sold in yet. I'm not bought in 100%. Or like, hey, on the other end of it's like, oh, I've been a fan of the brand for 8, 9 years already. So it's like we're constantly bringing new people in, so we have to nurture them and bring them along the journey. But then we also have to, like, we have 10 years of incredible customer base that supports us, and we have to cater to them too.
How do you balance that?
So a lot of it comes down to just like our product teams, like, understanding, like, really understanding who we're designing for, and then on the marketing end, it just comes down to just, like, you know, understanding, like, you know, how much more, how are we breaking down the budgets to, like, attract new users. And then how are we we're keeping the ones we have happy, right? So there's no, like, one way to answer that question.
Are you able to share what percentage of the budget is allocated to new users?
I couldn't even tell you. It fluctuates. You know, there's probably ballparks, but, like, it definitely fluctuates. Yeah.
So what have you found as of late to be, like, super effective to attracting those new users?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things we're doing on the media end, right? Like, this is just kind of getting a little, like, nerdy on the media side,
and that's paid ads, right?
Paid ads, yes, paid ads. You know, we work with an agency. There's things called lookalike audiences, right? So basically, you give them all your data of everyone who's purchased, and there's technology out there, ad tech, that can, like, say, hey, there's 5 million people that look like this type of person that don't know you exist. So what we do is we serve them display ads, we serve them video ads, we kind of take them through it, like, the funnel, right? So there's ad tech stuff that we do, right? And then there's also the brand stuff that we do, right? So, like, again,
do you mind sharing a little bit about that strategy with the lookalike audience? Because what are they seeing? Like, what's the creative look like? Are they being prompted to click on a button to go to a landing page, or? Yeah,
so for the most part, everything we do takes you to a PDP. So, like, product display page. So, like, you'll see an ad for a specific watch, and it takes you to that product display page. Cart. Exactly, right? Where it gets tricky is, like, we sell a lot of products. We have a pretty extensive SKU list. We're working on, you know, scaling that back a bit, but there's even within the watches, right? There's, like, different platforms and then different colorways, different sizes. So we're trying to kind of develop, you know, like, our tiered system of, like, hey, based on what we know on the consumer, based on the product, like, you know, we kind of categorize things like, hey, we think that these 5 watches would work well against this audience, these 5 against this audience, these 5 against this audience. And then, again, like, on the paid side, you can get so segmented and targeted.
What metrics are you using to determine that? Like these watches would...
It's kind of just intuition. Like, you know, we've been in the game long enough where we kind of just, like, know.
It's like
art and science.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a secret. It's a superpower that you develop over time.
Yeah, but the thing is too, like with digital advertising, like you can turn it on and off so quick. So like if it's not working, cool. We learn from that. It's not working. We can shut those ads off, upload new creative, get those up in a couple hours.
And for anyone watching that doesn't know, when somebody clicks on an ad and they land on a page, 9 times out of 10, there's a tracking pixel on that page.
So we know where they came from, how long they're staying on the site.
You're able to retarget.
And again, this is just all. This is all just like standard like internet like advertising, right? Digital advertising. So you know, we follow best practices and do all that. But it's constantly just like learning.
And what does constant mean in terms of time? Like how often are you guys fluctuating those ads?
So that's a good question. So our director of marketing like is the person who like meets with our agencies like weekly and like she handles most of that. But we're flipping creative over not as often as you would think, because I think the difference for us is that like, and again, this is like, I know that there's a lot of talk right now and like, you know, direct to consumer Twitter, like, oh, you need to be doing 100 ad sets a week and blah, blah, blah. Like we have the opposite of philosophy. Like our stuff, we take the time to shoot it well and make it beautiful. And like, again, going back to like, even the product itself is like designing it to be timeless. Like,
bro, I say all the time, quality will find the quantity.
Yeah.
You know,
facts. And you know, there's always talks about like creative fatigue. And I think my hot take is that like, I don't think it exists. Every single year, Corona runs the same holiday ad that they ran for like almost 20 years now. And people don't get tired of it. People will look forward to it, right? Like you said, if the creative's quality, it will find the audience and it will penetrate and it will last. And like you got a lot. And again, it's so different because like every single vertical is different. Every industry is different. Like for us, like we believe so much in the product and the brand and what we're doing that like we don't have to show you a million different photos of the watch. Maybe it's only 3.
Yeah, I think
you know,
people that are chasing that.
Yeah,
it's almost like running without a head on. Like you don't know, you're just throwing a bunch of nets out and seeing what catches. But I feel like when you have intuition and you have experience, you approach it from a different lens. You understand what the customer wants. You know? And you're able to provide that.
And another thing too is like at any given moment, 90% of your audience isn't in market for what you're selling. You know what I'm saying? Like even someone who buys watches more than the average person, they're not buying that many a year. So like there's all those months of where they're not in the market for a watch. So what are we serving them? Here's brand content. Here's storytelling. Here's us staying relevant, top of mind.
Bro, it goes.
You know what I'm saying? So like it's that balance of like understanding the journey and like user flow.
And it's like literally the same word, time. You know, I think about like the other day I was talking to someone and I was like, Gary Vaynerchuk. He's a personality. A lot of people know him. I've watched his videos for years. Then there were some years where I stopped watching that, you know?
Then you go back, he's doing the same. He's still talking the same talk, bro. Like he's so consistent.
But like the thing is, he came out with a book recently. Day Trading Attention.
Yeah.
And I just felt compelled inside of my body and soul. I bought like 10 copies.
Wow.
Because I'm like, 10 years later, this guy gave me so much value. I'm grateful for him. And then there's an opportunity for me to transact. I'm doing it. And I'm going to go all in. You know what 100%. I'm saying? And that's literally what brand is. It's you're building.
His first book, he talked about like jab, 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 hook, right? Like you give them something for free 3 times, then you hook them. Like it just honestly, it just goes like a lot of the principles of marketing and advertising haven't changed. They're not going to change. But here's the kicker. That takes time. And people want success yesterday. Right? And like people like you got to understand building anything that has longevity is going to take time.
Dude. It's literally,
you know, there's no shortcuts.
That should be the definition
brand.
of brand.
It literally,
time.
Literally, like, there's no shortcuts.
It's gonna take 10, 15 plus years before you get to that point where you start to feel like, like people are starting to, like how you guys now, people think you've been around a lot longer, but it was just time that got you to that place where people have that feeling about it.
And I feel like we're just getting started.
100%. What is something that you want to try? Like
personally, professionally?
In your career as a creative, like what's something that you're just kind of like, this is something that's been on my mind and I want to
eventually get to a point where I feel comfortable like making things, like physical things.
Like what?
Anything from like a magazine, like anything tangible. I just love I love the idea of like tangibility. And I think it's like, to me, it's like being a creative, it's the most vulnerable state you could be in. It's like making something and saying, hey, this is good enough for people to critique and consume. Yeah.
Bro, I just had a conversation with she owns M Contemporary Art.
Okay, yeah.
And we were talking about being an artist, being a creative means that you are being vulnerable to the world. Yeah. You're allowing people to come in, cast 100%. Judgment, leave their opinions, sometimes blank profile, talking shit.
Right, most times.
But I'm like, it really starts, and we said off camera, business to the core is just conversations that lead to negotiations. And it's like, because people start to get a sense, like for me with Gary Vee, like I got a sense of who he was. I appreciated him. The first opportunity I had to transact, I did, and I think that a lot of people reserve moving forward with that because of that kind of like fear or anxiety of like, what are people going to say? Like, this has been living in my mind for a long time, But I feel like once you break through and you're just kind of like, people don't really care as much as we think they do.
No. And I think again, like there's so much kind of like fake pressure added, right? And a lot of it's like, again, we're not going to know the negative effect. I mean, we're starting to see the negative effects of social media, but like there's like all these like things that like, oh, you're always comparing yourself. There's all this stuff that's happening because of social media that people always think that like, as much as it excels creativity, I feel like it also hinders it too. Right?
In what way?
Like you're saying, like the fear of being judged, the fear of posting things. Like, I don't want to post this. Like, what if it gets 0 likes? You shouldn't post it because of the likes. You should post it because you created it. You love it.
It came from you,
right? Like it's something that you want to share.
Yeah.
And I think we as a society, there's like this like thing where we kind of take ourselves too seriously sometimes. Like everyone always kind of talks about like, oh, Instagram, like when Instagram first started, like I'd post a photo of a rock and then like, my foot, whatever, right?
100 likes.
Yeah. Not like, and it wasn't even about the likes. It was like, here's just a thing that I like.
Yeah.
Right. And now everything's so curated.
Letting people in.
Everything's so curated now that like, if it's not like cool, successful, whatever, people aren't posting things. And I just think like getting back to that point.
Let me ask you a question on that.
Yeah.
And I'm interested about your answer.
Yeah.
Do you think that corporate America is somewhat to blame for that? Because when big brands come into any place where it's typically first opened up to like the general public, and like Facebook, it was first with college students and then families and stuff, and then it started to become like a place for profit. Do you feel like corporate America kind of had something to do with that? Or?
I don't know. I think it's probably more than one thing. I would say just as much it's like kind of like corporation, like just as much it's them. It's the consumer too. Like, they're only giving us what we want. Yeah.
No, I agree. I agree 100%.
Like everyone wants the dopamine hit from, getting the likes and the comments, and like, it's a double-edged sword. Yeah. That's the best way to put it. Yeah. It's the best way to put it.
And it's like we get, like we were saying earlier too, it's like when we don't have what we want in front of us, we complain about it. But when we have it, we complain about it. Right. Like with the weather in Michigan, and when it's hot, we complain. When it's cold, we complain, I think that, because there's that conversation that people blaming social media for like their kids being indoors or, like all of this. I think it's just, it's optional. Like you can turn it off.
You can choose,
if you want.
Like you can choose to.
But even with like the ads with Apple, I'm like, why? I never understood why people would get so offended when they're being tracked. It's like if you can get a tailored, curated presentation of your life, what you like and you're interested in, and you see that as a negative,
right? It's all subjective, right? It's just like it all comes down to preference.
Different strokes for different folks.
Absolutely,
bro, you know. Yeah. So how do you approach like taking risk?
Yeah,
specifically in like branding.
That's a good question. I think so much of it comes down to like a couple things. One being just intuition, right? I think the word risk gets kind of overused a lot. Like I do think that most people, I'd like to believe, are like more calculated than that, right? So a lot of it comes down to intuition. A lot of it comes down to just like understanding like who we are, what the brand is, what we're not. And then the third thing is understanding like, all right, what are we trying to accomplish with this opportunity or this risk, right? Like, and are there other ways to solve this problem? Right. And it's just like, it's balancing all those things, but it's also just like, hey, if the goal is to do this, let's map out all the ways we could do it and try, to assess these things in like the order of risk.
It's more of a calculated risk.
100%. I think everything is.
Yeah. 100%. I think when you approach something, it first starts with an idea.
Yeah.
And then you don't know if it's going to work until you actually try it.
You never know.
You put it into action. You see what like how you were saying earlier about the ads, you can literally run a ton of ads, see what works, what's not working, make changes and adjust, and then understand that like in order to succeed, you have to fail.
Yeah, and I always tell people that things can't evolve until they exist, right? And like so many people don't get to the point of evolving their ideas because they never let them exist, right? And like I speak at colleges sometimes and do some mentoring, and I always tell people like, if you want to be a good creative, you have to make things and put them out into the world. And you have to be okay with people not liking them. You have to be okay with quote unquote failing. And that's because that's part of the process.
Everybody does it.
That's part of the process, right? But like, you're never going to get to that thing that like quote unquote puts you on. Like that won't happen the first time. That comes through an evolution of you and your work.
That's huge.
But if you don't let yourself even have that evolution, then you're never going to get to that thing, right? Like things have to exist for them to evolve.
It's like, think about your favorite artist.
Yeah.
Let's say it's Drake.
Right.
I'm sure there's like 100,000 songs that are trash that he never released.
Right.
And now you look at his
catalog,
and you're like, man, this guy's a genius. But it took all of those,
Yeah. And again, that goes back to social media. And it's like, you only see the platinum records. You don't see Drake in the studio for days and weeks and months making songs that are never going to be released because they're not good enough, right?
100%.
You don't see that part of it. You don't see that part of, the artist painting over and over and over again. You don't see the work, right?
It's an evolution of time.
Yeah.
I feel like that's
going back to the
that's
time
literally
part of it.
all it is. It's just everybody understand that you have to start. And
you have to.
Time will get you to that point where people look at you and think, how did you do that? Time.
And it's just like, I always talk about this like this analogy of like one step a day. Right? How do you take one step a day towards your goal, towards whatever you're trying to do? And it might not feel like a lot. One little thing, one little step. But if you look back a year from now, that's 365 steps that you've taken. And what's funny is when I was younger, I was, way more naive. I was always trying to do like, I was always trying to jump 10 steps. I was like doing big swings and missing every single time, right? And what happens is over the course of a year, I'll start something, I'll take a big jump, doesn't work, come back. Start something, take a big jump, come back, right? While the other person is literally just doing one step a day.
What does the one step a day look like? Because
it could be anything.
Yeah.
It could honestly be anything. It could be sending that cold email, DMing someone. It could be posting a photo, making a video. It could just be anything.
Huge.
One little thing a day.
Just make a list.
Yeah.
Make a list and then check a couple things off.
Yeah.
Each day. If that's your way of starting, because then over time you're gonna start to get into this.
The stuff will compound.
100%.
You know what I'm saying? And again, that could be anything. Like, you know, if you're a chef, like design, like let's create one dish a day.
Yeah.
Or like, hey, I'm gonna make I'm gonna use one food I haven't used before, one ingredient I haven't used before. Like anything that's gonna propel you, make you better at your craft, get you to that next thing, right? But just as important as that one step is, it's just as important to like know what you're walking towards. Right? Because like you could take a step this way, then this way, then this way, and then this way, and then you're still back at square one. Like you have to know that, you have to have that vision of like, here's what I'm trying to get to. And one step a day is fine because it's still progress. You know?
You mentioned earlier, I forgot how you described it. It was your not your cushion, your framework or
guardrails framework.
Guardrails.
Yeah.
What does that mean, or what does that look like? Like you were saying, as long as I have guardrails, I feel good. Like it's a good
So I think it's like what I meant by that is like within any aspect of my life or any aspect of like, you know, work. Like if it's a partnership, I have guardrails. Right? If it's content, we have guardrails.
But like, what are those? What are those guardrails?
So just I guess it depends on like the specifics. Like partnerships, right? It was like 1 + 1 = 3. Like it's kind of like things that I develop over time that like I apply to certain kind of situations. But
got it. So are they set up to kind of like help you
to guide me
succeed?
Yeah.
Because like for me, it popped into my mind. I'm like, all right, like the bowling alley guardrails.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
You throw the ball down, those guardrails keep the ball in line.
Yeah.
So
it's the same sort of kind of ideology of like it keeps me on the path, right? If I'm going straight, I might veer off right naturally. My guardrails will stop me from going too far. Right? But like I try to kind of develop little things for like just different thing, right? Like again, like partnerships, like whatever stuff like that is like I always try to like know where I can push things, where I can't push things.
And the reason I ask is because if we were talking to a brand that's you know trying to blow up or trying to grow, what would you recommend those guardrails be in order?
It's so subjective.
Okay.
It's so subjective because it's like it comes down to like what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, like what your voice is, your messaging, what who your consumer is. Like there's so many things. Again, I think the larger thing probably goes back to like could versus should, right? Like asking yourself, what should I be doing versus what I could be doing? Because it's very easy, again, to do anything, right? The could is always going to be bigger, right? Like as a person, a personality, a brand, whatever, like the could is always going to be endless. But having a clearly defined should, like what should we be doing? That's what I think, like those become your personal guardrails, you know?
How do people get to that should? Like what questions do they ask themselves?
Yeah.
Like how do they?
I mean, I think personally it's just like, you know, what brings you joy? What brings you fulfillment? What brings you, you know, how do you like spending your time? How don't you like spending your time? Like basic things like that, I think start to set guardrails up. You know, like literally like, hey, I don't like doing this.
But it's so simple, but so true.
Yeah.
It's like, I think that people, how you said earlier, overcomplicate it.
Yeah.
And it really is just kind of like, well, if I'm going to be doing this all day, am I going to enjoy doing this all day?
Right.
Like, do I want to be talking to these kind of people or do I want like to be doing this? I think that it's just figuring out what those guardrails are for you and kind of allowing yourself to feel comfortable with the knowing of I can change my mind in
100%.
a day or two or a week
100%.
if I want, you know?
100%. And I think like, again, they always say there's like this old saying like, write your ideas in sand, not stone.
Right? I never heard that one.
So the idea is like, you know, when you like chisel something in stone, it's there forever. But with sand, you can just wipe it up and rewrite it.
Reset.
So it's like, always write your ideas in sand, right? Always, because again, you're not going to know until you try something. So like, you know what? Like, you don't, I think what I've experienced sometimes, like just kind of through like my corporate, like professional career, is like so many people get caught up in doing something because that's the way it's been done, versus like doing something, versus finding a better way to do it,
versus trying to figure out what they want to do.
Right. That too. Right. So I think it's the same sort of ideology of like, same sort of thought process of like,
bro, because I think that if you know what you want to do, how to do it right will come to you.
Right.
But until
but the how can always change.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think most people have that flip where it's like, here's how I do it no matter what. You know what I'm saying? And that's where
9 times out of 10, it's going to change.
It will. 100%.
Because when you start something, like for example, if it's a small organization, small brand, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be doing it all yourself.
100%.
And then you're going to start to figure out, what are the things that I don't like to do?
Yeah.
What can I outsource? What can I find someone? Then it becomes kind of like, all right, I have to become kind of like a talent scout. I have to find people to fill these roles or these, tasks. And then it's just a matter of like, all right, here I am now in this current state.
Yeah.
What do I want to do now? So it's going to change. It has to change.
It will. Yeah.
Because otherwise, how we said, it won't evolve.
Right.
With
100%.
time.
Yeah.
Well, bro, thank you so much for being here.
That's it. We already hit an hour?
Yeah.
Wow.
It flies by, bro. I appreciate your time.
I appreciate you, man. This was a really, really good conversation.
I hope to do it again.